Thank you and welcome to this panel titled Population, Family Planning and Women's Reproductive Issues. We have a great panel of experts today who are going to talk about the various layers of issues that are associated with this topic. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce the speakers. We have with us Dr. Zeba Sathar, who is Country Director of the Population Council. We have Ms. Tahira Abdullah, who is a human rights defender and social scientist. And we have Dr. Farrukh Zaman, who is a gynecologist, obstetrician, and fertility consultant. So before I hand this over to the speakers, I'm just going to very quickly set a little bit of context. So, I think when we talk about population and family planning, I think a good starting point for where we stand currently in the policy landscape is the 1994 historic conference on population and development, where Pakistan did play a key role, but there were about 179 member states that adopted a program of action according to which reproductive health and women's equality was to play a very central role when it came to policies around population and development. And since 1994, even in Pakistan, we have seen significant improvements in some indicators. So, even when we talk about maternal health, maternal mortality, maternal morbidity, there are significant improvements. The rates of deaths have been declining steadily. Contraceptive prevalence has increased. Similarly, rates of child marriage have declined. But there are certain problems that are continuing to persist. And so, for example, one alarming statistic is that in the last, in the 5-year period between 2012 and 2017, contraceptive prevalence rate, the use of family planning methods has remained stagnant. So in spite of numerous interventions, that has not increased. And when we look at maternal health, our maternal mortality ratio still stands at 189 per 100,000 deaths, which represents an improvement, but is still a very high figure because most of these deaths are preventable. So why some of these challenges are persisting and what we can do to address them is what we're going to discuss. So I would first like to invite Ms. Tahira Abdullah to share some of her thoughts, and I'm going to ask each panelist to please keep their talk limited to 10 minutes.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम. और मैं कहना तो चाहती थी गुड मॉर्निंग, लेकिन पिछला सेशन इतना लंबा चला कि अब मैं आपको गुड आफ्टरनून कहूँगी. I notice there are people who may not understand Urdu, so I should keep this bilingual. बहुत शुक्रिया मेरी दोस्त आसमा जहांगीर के सिलसिले में सालाना एनुअल मेमोरियल कॉन्फ्रेंस. For me, it is not just an honor and a privilege to be invited to be a speaker here. It is also a very emotional moment for me because while Pakistan lost and the whole world lost an icon, I lost a very dear friend. So, मेरे लिए थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है. There are two experts who are technical experts in addition to being population and demography experts and medical experts. लिहाजा मैं अपने आप को महदूद करूँगी non-technical aspects. मौजू जो है जो कॉन्फ्रेंस के लिए दिया गया है वो बहुत वास्ट है. It's like a lot of things all rolled into 1 hour and now perhaps just 50 minutes. Population, family planning, women's reproductive issues. ये बहुत ही एक भरपूर और वास्ट एक सब्जेक्ट है. लिहाजा मुमकिन नहीं है कि तीनों मौज़ूआत पर गुफ्तगू की जाए. मैं अपने आप को महदूद करूँगी women's reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health aspects, public policy, government and state views on the subject. मैं इस तरफ जाऊंगी ताकि हमारे जो दो टेक्निकल एक्सपर्ट्स हैं वो फिर आपके साथ टेक्निकल एस्पेक्ट्स पे डिस्कस करें. यहाँ पे कहा गया maternal mortality ratio is 189 over 100 per 100,000 live births. Or I'm not sure what Dr. Farrukh Zaman and Dr. Zeba Sathar think about it, but in my view, it's an underestimation. So perhaps they'll be able to answer that. आप लोगों में से हाथ उठाइएगा कितने लोगों को मालूम है कि पाकिस्तान में औरतें कितनी हैं. I'd like a show of hands as to the population of women in Pakistan. अफसोसनाक बात है. It is a matter of sorrow and grief and shame for Pakistan that we are 48.8% of the population. Contrary to the global norm, with the exception of China and India, perhaps Nepal, where women outnumber men in the whole world, except in this part of the world, और पाकिस्तान में 48.8%, और ये आज से नहीं, ये 1981 के सेंसस से चलता चला आ रहा है. इस पर मुझे मोहतरमा सारा मलकानी साहिबा ने कहा था कि एक सब participants will bring one resolution or recommendation, and so my recommendation is going to be on this aspect. Introductory remarks में आपने जिक्र किया International Conference on Population and Development 1994 Cairo. डॉक्टर नफीस सादिक उस वक्त एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर थी यूनाइटेड नेशंस पॉपुलेशन फ़ंड की, और उस वक्त मोहतरमा बेनज़ीर भुट्टो पाकिस्तान की प्राइम मिनिस्टर थी, और बहुत उम्दा स्पीचेस वहाँ पर की गई. एंड पाकिस्तान मेड कमिटमेंट्स not just to reproductive health, but to sexual and reproductive rights of women and men and transgenders. और साथ साथ ना सिर्फ ये कि फैमिली प्लानिंग पर, लेकिन पॉपुलेशन एंड डेवलपमेंट पे बहुत जोर दिया गया. Women's empowerment was focused on. The right to a safe abortion was focused on. Economic development, poverty reduction, environment and climate change, हर तरह की linkages बनाई गई थी ICPD Cairo में. And do you know that Pakistan committed to each and every one of these without reservation? और ये 1994 की बात है. 1995 में Beijing 4th World Women's Conference हुई थी. And again, the state of Pakistan made unreserved commitments. वो तो 1996 में साइन किया था, जी किया था, but that was not unreserved. उसमें दो reservations थी. We won't. This is not the subject, and I certainly don't have the time to go into it. But we can talk about it later if you like. Gender focused budgeting, gender resource budgeting पर भी जिक्र किया गया. बहुत सारा कुछ कहा गया. That was like, 3 decades ago almost. लेकिन commitments are worth only the signature on the paper that you sign them on. मुझे याद है कि 1994 में it was not just the ICPD Cairo. There was also bringing religious scholars on board. Not just Muslim religious scholars, but Catholics and Christians, all sorts of religious scholars came on board and decided that family planning, population, reproductive and sexual health and rights were very much part of all religions of the world, except, of course, the Catholics don't believe in abortion and contraception, but that's not our subject today. और उन्होंने एक declaration sign की थी just before the Cairo conference started. Today, I brought with me a report to show you, but now that we are running late, there's no time to show it. एक fundamentalist, orthodox, conservative discourse शुरू हो चुका है, या तक़वियत ले रहा है. There's an increased move to the right in countries like Pakistan. However, when we look at the region, we look at Iran, which is a theocratic state, and it's a Muslim theocratic state, it's a Shia theocratic state. We need to ask ourselves, why are they doing better than us? क्या वजूहात हैं कि वो हमसे बेहतर जा रहे हैं? Reproductive health, reproductive rights. I know what is happening in Iran about the hijab and Masa Amini. 2018 में एक constitutional amendment आई जो कि 18th constitutional amendment थी. And that is a very, very important milestone in Pakistan's constitutional history. Because it's also known, Urf-e-Aam mein, the devolution amendment, the provincial autonomy amendment. लेकिन अंग्रेजी ज़बान का एक मुहावरा है, and I'll say it in English and then if you want I can translate it into Urdu. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we've done that. We got rid of the Federal Ministry of Population. We've got health, whatever that means. Don't tell me सेहत, health का मतलब सेहत होता है, मुझे मालूम है, लेकिन मैं population की बात कर रही हूँ. So now there's no one looking after population. The health ministry doesn't own it, no ownership. The provinces fight for turf between the departments of population welfare and the departments of health. And they've been doing that for the last 40 or 50 years. So, नया क्या है? तब्दीली किधर है? नया पाकिस्तान किधर है? SRHR, Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. पाकिस्तान में फैमिली प्लानिंग तो शायद रह गई हो कहीं कहीं, कभी कभी. ना सेक्सुअल हेल्थ एंड राइट्स, ना रिप्रोडक्टिव राइट्स. तो बस हेल्थ ही कहीं शायद हो. टैबू हो चुका है ये सब कुछ. हम बहबूद आबादी की बात करते हैं, पॉपुलेशन वेलफेयर की बात करते हैं. वेयर इज़ द राइट्स? और हम औरतों पर फोकस करते हैं. Population and planned parenthood is parenthood. Where are the men in the family planning program of Pakistan? Where are the media? Where are the news and current affairs and entertainment, the dramas, the concerts, the sports? Dr. Sathar member वो बताएंगी आपको, वो member हैं Supreme Court और government की बहुत सारी बहुत high level किस्म की थिंक टैंक्स में. तो हम पूछते हैं कि आप तो अपनी रिकमेंडेशंस देती चली जा रही हैं डॉक्टर साहिबा, उनका बन क्या रहा है? वेयर इज़ द ओनरशिप ऑफ ऑल ऑफ दैट विद इन सक्सेसिव? और मैं यहाँ किसी एक हुकूमत का नाम नहीं लूँगी, क्योंकि मिलिट्री हुकूमत हो या सिविलियन, राइट विंग हो, लेफ्ट विंग हो, सेंटर हो, कोई भी हो, A to Z parties, nobody has really owned population in the last 30 odd years to the extent that it needs to be owned and taken and adhered. The commitments must be adhered to. आखिर में मैं अपनी recommendation पेश करूँगी आपकी हिदायत और instructions के मुताबिक, and my recommendation is very simple, very small, very doable, baby steps. इस साल सेंसस होगा. एक पाकिस्तान ब्यूरो ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स, किसी ज़माने में एक पॉपुलेशन सेंसस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कहलाता था एक चीज़, have already done a pilot test, small level exercise. तो जब PBS, पाकिस्तान ब्यूरो ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स के साथ मीटिंग हुई पिछले हफ्ते, तो उन्होंने कहा कि 1 साल में 1 मिलियन बेबीज़ को वैक्सीनेट किया जाएगा. 1 साल में 1 मिलियन बेबीज़ को वैक्सीनेट किया जाएगा. 1 साल में 1 मिलियन बेबीज़ को वैक्सीनेट किया जाएगा. they accepted the fact that the 2017 census is problematic, has issues, especially issues of under-enumeration. गिनती कम हुई है, हम जितने हैं वो नज़र नहीं आते 2017. और बाय द वे बराए करम इसको मर्दमशुमारी मत कहिएगा, क्योंकि फ़ारसी में मर्दमशुमारी मर्दों को काउंट करने को कहते हैं. मैं मजबूर ना करें मुझे कि मैं ख़ातून शुमारी या ख़ानुम शुमारी का मुतालबा करूं. सो लेट्स कॉल इट इफ़राद शुमारी. इफ़राद शुमारी, ठीक है, ठीक है, इफ़राद शुमारी. मेरी रिकमेंडेशन है, contrary to the objections raised by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics just last week in an interministerial meeting, when I recommended and requested 10 basta कि प्लीज़ आप एक औरत को ले आए एनुमरेटर्स के साथ, एक टीम बना लें ताकि वो घरों के cultural constraints of parda, especially in the rural areas, do not permit men to enter homes to verify. अगर मर्द बाहर so-called head of household अगर कह रहा है कि I'm the head of the household, I have 5 sons and 2 daughters and 1 wife. And actually there are 4 wives and 10 daughters. But they're not being enumerated. So मैंने request की थी PBS के बहुत senior level से कि जी please आप एक खातून को हर मेल एनुमरेटर के साथ भेजें, every single one. And you have अगर आप elections करवा सकते हैं टीचर्स के साथ, तो आप census क्यों नहीं करवा सकते टीचर्स के साथ, और health workers and lady health workers and family welfare workers and lady health visitors. आपके पास कमी नहीं है सरकारी स्टाफ की. So he says, sorry madam, हमारा तो सिर्फ एक होता है, टीम तो होती नहीं, आपको ये नहीं पता? मैंने कहा जी मुझे पता है, बट दिस इज़ नॉट फॉर द रिकॉर्ड. आप मुझे किसी मजहबी किताब, आई रिफ्यूज टू यूज़ वन होली बुक का नाम, आप मुझे शो मी वन रिलीजियस सेक्रेड टेक्स्ट which says that enumerators shall be going in teams of 1 and male only. Okay, so the recommendation is increase the number of enumerators to 2 persons per team, and mandatory 1 shall be a woman, so that at least the women of Pakistan and the girls of Pakistan and the transgenders of Pakistan and the girls living with disabilities of Pakistan shall be counted in 2022. Thank you.
अहम रिकमेंडेशन है, क्योंकि जब तक हमारे पास सही डेटा नहीं होगी तो हमारे जो पॉलिसी सॉल्यूशंस हैं वो भी ठीक नहीं होंगे. तो अब मैं दावत देती हूँ डॉक्टर सतार को कि वो हमारे साथ अपने ख़यालात और ओपिनियंस शेयर करें.
जी शुक्रिया सारा. एंड I'd really like to thank the पता नहीं इंग्लिश में बोलना चाहिए उर्दू में मगर मिक्स्ड चीज़. I'd really like to congratulate the organizers, particularly Munize Jahangir, who really insisted that there should be such a session. I don't think there have been sessions in the past on this area of sexual reproductive SRH, whatever as you call it, and particularly for getting somebody like Tahira to speak and Sara to moderate. And I want to, and of course Dr. Farrukh साहब हमें तो इन्होंने टेक्निकल एक्सपर्ट्स में डाल दिया, तो जो कुछ हम उसमें ऐड कर सकें. मैं आप लोगों की तवज्जो लाना चाहती हूँ कि आज सारा ने ख़ुद इतना अच्छा आर्टिकल लिखा है, हमारे सारे व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स में डॉन में आया है और सबको पढ़ना चाहिए. क्योंकि मुख्तसर मैं कहूँगी कि वो ये कहती हैं इन द आर्टिकल कि राइट टू लाइफ इज़ ऑल्सो राइट टू हेल्थ. बेसिकली आप अबॉर्शन के हवाले से, अबॉर्शन राइट्स के हवाले से बात कर रही हैं. मैं ये कहना चाहूँगी कि आई थिंक जो सारी आपने बातें की ताहिरा 94 की कॉन्फ्रेंस से लेके, और यू मेंशन द फेडरल टास्क फोर्स, आयरॉनिकली आजकल की जो पॉलिसी है फैमिली प्लानिंग और पॉपुलेशन के हवाले से, वो एक सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जो एक्स थे हमारे चीफ जस्टिस, उन्होंने after the 2017 census, he really called this to, as actually took suo moto action, because he just thought कि rapid population growth rate was not getting enough attention. तो जो आप टास्क फोर्स का हवाला कर रही हैं, आजकल जो करंट पॉलिसी है in पाकिस्तान, these are the Council of Common Interests recommendations rather decisions. And मैं अगर अपने पहले ही बता दूं कि मेरा क्या recommendation होगा कि at least since this is a large group of lawyers, that you should go back and really make sure कि जो इतनी मुश्किल से पास हुई थी एक decisions जो cover करते हैं, जो करना चाहिए actually about family planning at least, they should be endorsed. They are not being endorsed at all. So I agree with you, Tahira, कि हमने we have talked a lot. I really recall being at the ICPD in 1994. 28 साल गुजर चुके हैं और बेनज़ीर भुट्टो ने एक चीज़ कही थी जो सब media, international media, and everyone picked it up. कि I dream of a world where no child is unwanted. Yani, it was a very no pregnancies unplanned. If I start, since you made me a technical expert, let me start by throwing out some statistics about Pakistan. Despite all our efforts, despite कि एक family planning program बहुत सबसे पहली country थी practically in Asia जहाँ family planning program हुआ था in the 1960s, 1956, yes, you're right, and then official program since 1963. We still have a contraceptive prevalence rate of about 34%, whereas all the other countries, जो ममालिक हैं, चाहे आप मुसलमान, Islamic countries, हमारे इर्द गिर्द ईरान का आपने जिक्र किया, Iran on the west, Indonesia on the east, they have double the rates of contraceptive prevalence. They too are Islamic. They are too good. They are also good Muslims like us. And in the region, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Bangladesh is also a Muslim country, also have double the contraceptive prevalence rate. So we have 34%. Everywhere else is 65 to 70%. Why is that? And that is the question I think that we've all been trying to tackle, despite all the statements by Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, despite the fact that she set up one of the best programs, I think, that in the world possibly, was the Lady Health Worker Program, जहाँ औरतें जाती थीं घर घर और उनको involve करना चाहिए in the census. We argued a lot, and they are partially involved, but I think they are the best people to enter the house and have the conversation. So there are multiple reasons, और आपका session इतना लंबा होगा कि मैं तो लोगों को bore कर दूँगी, मगर I think there is a lack of intent, because I do agree कि मर्दों को include नहीं किया in the family planning program, but have we even included the rights of women in the family planning program? It's just a program. We want to reduce fertility rates as if they come down, like we want to improve the weather or something like that. Magar at the center of this are people and women in particular. और अगर औरतों के centered program हैं और उनके उतनी rights पे नहीं हैं, ना वो घर से आसानी से निकल सकती हैं और उनके पास ना contraceptive services की availability है, ना वो campaigns हैं, ना उनको information पहुँचता है. So I think there is a lack of intent actually to provide those services. Just like education, जो session हो रहा था इससे पहले, हमने क्या किया अपने और किया भी है, जो services available भी हैं, they are of very, very poor quality. So the fact number one, as I call it, is really the half the prevalence rates of the rest of this region and of Asia. हम तो अब now articles have been written about Pakistan as the outlier. And why? It's an outlier on many accounts, and I agree with Parvez Hoodboy. I think the only comparable country in this region with us is really Afghanistan, sadly. The second fact is that agar hum samajhte hain ki there are the statistics show that there are 10 million pregnancies a year in Pakistan, give or take maybe a couple of 100,000. 10 million यानी कितने होते हैं लाखों में 16 हाँ एक करोड़ उनमें से जो है आधी तकरीबन आधी 4.5 million unwanted होती हैं. This is as declared by Pakistani surveys done by the National Institute of Population Studies. 4.5 million यानी 45% at least औरतें कहती हैं कि हम पिछली सॉरी पिछली प्रेगनेंसी जो है वो नहीं चाहते थे या थोड़ी देर के बाद वक्फे के बाद जाते थे, मैं हमें यानी वी weren't able to do this for multiple reasons. One of them I told you कि उनके पास इख्तियार ही नहीं था उसका, और दूसरा कि सर्विसेज उनके पास यानी वो अफोर्ड नहीं कर सकती थी, ट्रैवल नहीं कर सकती थी. एंड आउट ऑफ दोज 4.5 मिलियन 2.2 मिलियन, ये हमने पॉपुलेशन काउंसिल ने स्टडी की थी जो आप अभी कह रहे थे डॉक्टर, अभी डॉक्टर साहब, डॉक्टर जमान वाज ऑन आवर टैग एंड सारा यू आर ऑन आवर टैग technical advisory group. We are doing the study again this year. In 2012, out of the 4.5 million pregnancies that were unwanted, 2.2 million ended up in induced abortions. And although abortion is permissible under certain very, very severe, I think you know the law, Sara, you've written about it just today. बहुत severe conditions में allowed है, but abortions are happening in Pakistan. They are mainly very, very unsafe unless you live in an urban area. But they are, I was happy to report कि not everything is bad in Pakistan. एक खुशाइन यानी बात है कि हमारी नई स्टडी की जो हम preliminary findings हमें मिल रही हैं अभी, we are just about to, we are pre-testing कि एक medication abortion एक चीज़ यहाँ introduce हुई है जो कि it is a much safer method and hopefully इतनी उससे mortality नहीं होगी. यानी औरतें मरती थीं, यानी इतनी शिद्दत से उनको वो चाहती थीं कि अगला बच्चा ना हो, और for good reasons कि afford नहीं कर सकती हैं and so on, उसकी अपनी सेहत को देखते हुए. तो they prefer to have an abortion which costs a lot of money. 5,000 से 10,000 होता था, पता नहीं कितना हो गया होगा पिछली स्टडी में. और जो इमोशनल स्ट्रेस होता है, जो साइकोलॉजिकल गिल्ट होता है of having an abortion, so many millions of women in Pakistan are experiencing. So my second, I guess, recommendation is really if the legal fraternity can really do something about making obviously medication abortion or abortion का जो ज़रा relaxation. Though I must say कि अभी तक पाकिस्तान में abortion को इतना criminalize नहीं किया है, so I'm not quite sure कि अगर हम बहुत उसका शोर उठाएंगे कहीं और ही उसका reaction ना हो, given the milieu that we live in right now. And maybe about maternal mortality आपने raise किया कि we have seen improvement, so I don't want कि हम बिल्कुल ही depressing scenario present करें. We have brought down the maternal mortality rate जो 276 per 100,000 live births था, अब बहुत ही जो last year survey हुई है तो we brought it down to 186. मगर हमने, ताहिरा आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रही हैं, एक स्टडी अभी इन डेप्थ रीजंस वही डेटा देखा है, और हमारी कोलीग हैं डॉक्टर अजरा एहसन, शी इज़ इन द लीडिंग द नेशनल कमेटी ऑन मैटरनल न्यूनेटल हेल्थ. उन्होंने एक हम नंबर तो बड़ा एक आसानी से 186 का दे रहे हैं, मगर जब उन्होंने एक वर्बल ऑटोप्सी पढ़ी है, उन्होंने एनालाइज किया और डिक्लेयर इट एज अ मैटरनल डेथ, तो उन्होंने दो चीज़ें उनकी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हैं फाइंडिंग्स. एक कि most of these maternal deaths were avoidable. वो घर में फैसला ना हो पाया कि हमें जाना चाहिए या ना जाना चाहिए औरत को लेके, क्योंकि औरत की लाइफ तो बहुत सस्ती है और इतनी पैसे खर्च करने पड़ेंगे. मगर जहाँ लेके भी गए हैं लोग, इतना शोर है कि वी शुड टेक अ वुमन, एंड दैट हैज़ बीन अ गेम चेंजर इन पाकिस्तान. Institutional delivery has gone up from about 30%, 30%, it has doubled. So there is good news. मगर अफसोस से ये कहना पड़ रहा है कि जो औरतें पहुंच भी रही हैं फैसिलिटी में, हमारी डॉक्टर अजरा हसन ने कहा है कि majority of them died due to something, and Dr. Farrukh Zaman would know better to elaborate that, but they died due to misadventures. She called it misadventure at the facility, meaning unnecessarily performing of surgical interventions or even neglect. She just used the word misadventure. So मेरे जो 2 मिनट हैं उसमें मैं सिर्फ recommendation की तरफ, since you asked us to end with the recommendation, I would say कि we have, Tahira, it will be news for you, but for the last 10 years, I'm almost ready to give up on it, but for the last 10 years, the Population Council and the United Nations Population Fund have focused on advocacy and communication with religious leaders who we find very supportive at least जो बहुत ही learned हैं, Council of Common Ideology agrees with what we say as long as we couch it in saving mothers' lives. Family planning के बारे में there isn't a controversy. हमने political parties, रहीला उठ के चली गई मगर जैसे रहीला दुरानी, हमने बहुत एक province के political leaders के साथ काम किया है और उनको भी जब बात आती है समझ में, there is no opposition. I think the opposition is really now left with those who are in power to implement programs. But I am really hopeful. जो कल मैंने, I attended the session and I see young lawyers and especially female lawyers. I would say अगर आप लोग आवाज़ उठाएंगे तो मेरे ख्याल से बहुत effective. We have also worked with media who, so far as wanting to understand the problem, pick it up from time to time. We have to sensationalize it for a bit. मगर अगर legal जो young lawyers हैं अगर कुछ वो इसको raise करें और Sara, you yourself being quite a very well-known personality, you're raising it in articles, मेरे ख्याल से your voice will be heard. So my recommendation would be that please look at what we've done, where the situation is, look at our reports, what we are saying. Magar the voice has to be yours, and I think it बहुत effective हो सकता है because there is a whole layer of bureaucracy that is not listening to us. And I think now we are reaching the end of the road. How shocking do you want our statistics to be? We are the worst in South Asia, we're the worst in Asia. If those sort of figures don't shame us, at least let's try and prevent each of those 186 or I think this is rakam thi, lives that were reported in 2019 that just died due to, pretty much I would say 70% died due to unavoidable causes. So I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sathar. और आपने बहुत, you gave us a wealth of information, but एक आपने जो statistic दिया, I'd just like to reiterate that half of all pregnancies in Pakistan are unwanted. So half of all these cases are cases where there was no choice to get pregnant. तो ये एक सिर्फ एक policy issue ही नहीं है, लेकिन मैं समझती हूँ कि ये एक बहुत बड़ी इंसानी हकूक़ का एक इशू है कि ये क्यों हो रहा है. और अब मैं डॉक्टर फ़र्रुख ज़मान को दावत दूंगी कि वो एज अ गायनोकोलॉजिस्ट भी हमें अपना पर्सपेक्टिव कुछ दिखाएं कि ये जो सारे जो इश्यूज़ रेज़ हुए हैं ये क्यों हो रहे हैं और इनकी प्रिवेंशन की तरफ हम कैसे जा सकते हैं.
Thank you very much. I'll start with what Sara started with about ICPD, International Conference on Population and Development, which was held in 1994. And why I would start from there is that prior to that, women's health concerns were addressed as maternal child health care and family planning at the most. That was the conference, and we must be proud of that because of the contribution of Dr. Nafis Sadiq in that, because she was executive director of UNFPA, and many would say that it was her brainchild, or she was the person who orchestrated the whole program of the conference and gave the direction that the conference took. Now, that conference brought about the change in the definition, and at that time it was said that that has brought a paradigm shift in our approach towards women's health. And UNO's definition, or World Health Organization's definition of health, changed to that it is a state of women's mental, physical, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease, and that all women should be provided the opportunity of reproductive health and rights consultation and the facilities. So therefore, this paradigm shift brought in the woman's whole life cycle into it. Now, if you look at it from technical point of view, the women's health is very much different from men's health. Men do not menstruate. Men do not reproduce. Men do not undergo a menopause. So therefore, the objective is to look at women's health as a whole. And therefore, it has been divided into 4 areas. One is from birth to adolescence. Adolescent health has its own issues and problems. And then there is reproductive life, roughly from the age of 15 to 45. And then the age of menopause. So these are the 4 stages or in a woman's life which have their peculiar issues and problems. Men do not have that. And in addition to that, there are overarching issues of sexual health and sexual rights, which are beyond that. So ICPD made a lot of difference so far as people's approach towards women health was concerned. I remember when that ICPD objectives were launched, even in Pakistan, through Family Planning Association and others. We talked about maternal mortality ratios, and I'll just allude to a particular aspect that Dr. Zeba Sathar said. That was the delays. Generally, it is considered to be 3 delays which are responsible for maternal deaths. One is, the first delay is at home, where the decision is being made whether to take the woman to the hospital or a health facility or not. There are so many people who are involved in that decision, the husband, the mother-in-law, etc., etc. Second delay comes in finding the transport, getting from home to the facility. And the third delay happens at the facility, which is not timely intervention or wrong intervention. Then we do not have blood bank services. Almost 40% of maternal deaths occur because of what is known as postpartum hemorrhage. And therefore, women die of excessive hemorrhage. Another important cause, of course, that has been already mentioned is unsafe abortion. Unsafe abortion, the issue is so much, as has already been said, that 45% pregnancies are unwanted. Out of these, 34% result in unintended births, and 54% of them, they end up in abortion. In the survey which was previously mentioned, it was estimated that 623,000 women, they were treated in various facilities for unsafe abortion complications. Now, to address that, what is important to avoid and prevent unsafe abortion? How can we do that? By use of contraception. And if I tell you about contraception, Family Planning Association of Pakistan came into being in 1953. The first Ministry of Population was created in 1966. In 1960s, the contraceptive prevalence rate of Pakistan was 5%. And in 1990, the contraceptive prevalence was 12%. In those more than 2 decades period, per year increase in contraceptive prevalence was less than 0.5%. And then from 90 till 2000, in those 10 years, there was a great increase. So much so that from 12% it became 33%. But then in years 2004 and 5, there was a decline and it became 30%. And the latest figures, according to UNFPA State of World Population, in 2019, the contraceptive prevalence rate was 33%, but unfortunately in 2022, it is down to 29%. So that is those are the kind of figures that we are dealing with about contraception. And this is the cheapest and easiest way of avoiding or preventing unintended pregnancies, of reducing the rate of unsafe abortions. Unsafe abortions are responsible for about 12% maternal deaths. Right. Another thing is the gender gap. We have been talking in the previous session also, Pakistan was compared with Afghanistan. Just 2 weeks back, we had a conference of obstetricians and gynecologists of South Asia, South Asian Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and I made a presentation where I put figures of South Asian countries in perspective. And unfortunately, in every area, Pakistan was next to Afghanistan. We did not come anywhere near, whether it is education, whether literacy. About literacy, if you look at it, since 2005 till 2022, there has not been any change in literacy rate. As a matter of fact, there were 5 years during these 17 years when literacy rate came down. Now, if you are looking at that literacy rate coming down, what do you expect? And it has been seen, there was a recent report from European Union. They had carried out a survey, and the only intervention that they thought could contain world's population was women's education. And then gender parity, intimate partner violence, those are the issues which do not necessarily remain only sociological issues, not only legal issues, they are also medical issues. So the community of doctors who deal with women, they also have to be sensitized about the telltale signs of violence, and they need to have that conversation with their patients. So these are various issues, and Dr. Zeba very rightly said that it is the intent or the political will. I generally give an example of this, that if you go through, just last sentence, if you pass one of these flyovers, you would see that Paya Takmeel, itna और वगैरह वगैरह इतना खर्चा और ये 100 दिन में complete हुआ. They can complete that flyover in 100 days because they wanted to do that. But here, we haven't been able to achieve any of these objectives because we do not want to. Probably these are not our priorities. Health and education are not our priorities. And so long as they are not our priorities, we will remain as we are, unfortunately. Very sad to say. Thank you.
Dr. Farrukh, do you have a recommendation?
लड़कियों की तालीम जो है वो अशद ज़रूरी है. और सॉरी, एक फिगर में रह गया, जेंडर गैप का. Even in Europe, the gender parity is at the current rate is likely to be achieved in 60 years. 60 years. Or 58 years, and the rest of the Western Europe, 60 years. And in South Asia, there are many areas. In South Asia, it will take 195 years for gender parity.
So with that depressing statistic, I think we just have 5 minutes for a Q&A session. Apologies, but the previous session also went over. So what I'll do is I'll take 2 questions and then we'll ask our panelists to kindly respond. So I see one hand up over there, and then I'll take Ms. Ahmed's question. Ji, sir.
I'm Farhan Bukhari, journalist. On the matter of census, you've talked about inclusion of women among the enumerators. But in the country, polio is one case where resistance and fierce resistance has come, and that resistance remains purely undented, for want of a better word. So really, how much difference could that and just very briefly to Dr. Zeba Sathar, bureaucratic lethargy or resistance from bureaucracy. Madam, isn't it true that the ultimate responsibility is that of leaders, whether they are political or military? We've seen in the case of Benazir Bhutto, practically every week, at least one session among her bureaucrats and some ministers and herself in the chair was devoted to women's issues, including population. And now for months go on, and we don't hear of the same messaging which used to come across from the very top. Isn't it true that it's the leaders who are going to make the change? Okay. Irrespective of what they might be telling you individually in conversations, political leaders.
Okay, Thank you. Before we go to the answers, I'll just take one last question, Ms. Ruxana Ahmed, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond.
Census, this question addressed to you. Why can't we take the Nadra on board? Because everything is now digital. So perhaps the government may obtain help from one of its own resources, and also a little more information on the media in general. It's not that our surroundings are illiterate, it's just that now through media you can reach right to the bottom, you know. So perhaps you could think about this as well.
I think Nadra ka ye hai कि I was on the last census committee thing, and Nadra was very, the heads of Nadra were very aggressively saying कि if we have, but it isn't full coverage. And in fact, you raise an important point that, you know, if we go by Nadra, the very excluded, the proportion of people who don't have an NIC card, who are not registered, are women. Are women living in very remote areas that are not even part of, I know that also because when BIS beneficiaries are excluded, they say, okay, we have covered every one of the, but if you don't have an CNIC card, you cannot claim that even that unconditional cap. I think the idea would be good if Nadra had complete coverage, which they don't, unfortunately. But they are being involved in this new digital census for next year. So I think everyone needs to be involved. It's not that anyone can tackle this alone. And since I have the mic, Tahira, you should end the session. But to Farhan Saab, I would say yes. I was just saying that, you know, basically political leadership comes and goes, but the bureaucracy stays. So in a way, if they do decide to set off the motion, actually implementing just the CCI recommendations of 2018, such as one of the critical ones was to release rupees 10 billion annually. And the Ministry of Finance, we've been there several times, it hasn't happened. But I do agree with you that if the political leadership, for instance, the main recommendation of those CCI decisions was that the Prime Minister must chair the federal task force. Within 1 month, Imran Khan Saab, the previous Prime Minister, said, "Nee, I don't think that this deserves too much time. I do not have time," and passed it on to the presidency. And then immediately it lost its importance. So I do agree with you. The top executive prioritizes it. And I don't know when that day will come, as Benazir Bhutto did. I think she's the last one that I can recall who did. So I agree with you that that's how it happened in Bangladesh. That's how it happened elsewhere as well. Political leadership is very important.
शुक्रिया फरहान साहब. पोलियो वर्कर्स, मैं यहाँ पर जो पाकिस्तान की ज्योग्राफी में नहीं जाना चाहती, ना एथनिसिटी में जाना चाहती हूँ, लेकिन पोलियो की जो रेजिस्टेंस है वो पॉकेट्स में है और हम सब जानते हैं कि कहाँ है रेजिस्टेंस. My condolences and sympathies to the families of all the women polio workers जिनको मैं लफ्ज़ शहीद इस्तेमाल करूँगी यहाँ पर, और उनके साथ जो उनके पुलिस एस्कॉर्ट्स थे उनको भी जिनको शहीद किया गया. हमारी तमाम तर हमदर्दियाँ उनके साथ हैं. लेकिन पोलियो को सेंसस के साथ इसलिए नहीं मवाजना किया जा सकता, कंपेयर नहीं किया जा सकता कि ये एक कंट्री वाइड एक्सरसाइज होगी. 230, 240 व्हाटएवर मिलियन वी आर, हेड काउंट पूरा 100% हेड काउंट, और वो पॉकेट्स पाकिस्तान के मुख्तलिफ दूर दराज इलाकों के और कराची और लाहौर और पेशावर के शहरों के पॉकेट्स के अंदर जहाँ पर पोलियो की वैक्सीनेशन की रेजिस्टेंस आ रही, इम्यूनाइजेशन की जहाँ रेजिस्टेंस आ रही है, वो हम समझते हैं. लेकिन मेरे नज़दीक बुखारी साहब, इस दोनों चीज़ों को हम ना मिलाएं और उसको वजह ना बनाएं कि हम अपनी हेल्थ वर्कर्स को या अपनी टीचर्स को, अपनी तमाम गवर्नमेंट के जितने एम्प्लॉयज़ हैं जिनको इस्तेमाल किया जा सकता है, आप एक दिन टर्की की तरह आप एक दिन की छुट्टी कर दें. as is, where is की बुनियाद पर आप head count करें. I mean, there are experts sitting here. Who am I to give them the suggestions? She's on the task force, she's on the committee, she's everything. सब कुछ Sara's been writing on it. तो इसलिए मैं तो सिर्फ यहाँ आवाज़ उठाने के लिए आई हूँ कि ये हैं issues. मैं फ्लैग कर रही हूँ. अब आप कुछ कीजिए इसके बारे में. और माफ़ कीजिएगा, आखिरी बात कि जिस तरह की एक एटीट्यूड मैंने पिछले हफ्ते जस्ट अ फ्यू डेज अगो इन इस्लामाबाद पाकिस्तान ब्यूरो ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स के सीनियर तरीन मैनेजमेंट की तरफ से पाया, एक तो मैं ना मानूं और दूसरा ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता, ये तो कभी हुआ ही नहीं, औरतें हम टीम तो है ही नहीं, वो तो एक बंदा जाता है और इतने हमने ब्लॉक्स पर मैडम आप ये बहुत टेक्निकल चीज़ है, आपको तो मैं तो औरत हूँ ना, बूढ़ी एक बूढ़ी सी सफ़ेद बालों वाली औरत, उसको बेचारी को क्या समझ आएगी, जाहिल अनपढ़, तो आपको नहीं समझ आएगा. हम ब्लॉक्स बनाते हैं, फिर उसमें ये होता है आई डोंट हैव टाइम टू गो इनटू दैट एंड सारा विल कट मी ऑफ इन अ सेकेंड. सो इसको इतना एक डेमोग्राफिकली टेक्निकल इशू और मुश्किल कर दिया कि my suggestion, my recommendation was basically thrown out the window. ये तो जी काउंसिल ऑफ कॉमन एंड CCI की मीटिंग में उठाना पड़ेगा, 1 से 2 किस तरह, इसके लिए तो शायद लॉ बनाना पड़े पार्लियामेंट में. Forget it, it's not happening. So औरतें वही 48%. मैंने इसीलिए सवाल शुरू में पूछा था. आखिर में आपने नादरा, मैडम आपने नादरा का जिक्र किया. डॉक्टर सत्तार ने आपको बहुत खूब भरपूर जवाब दिया है, लेकिन एक डेटा पॉइंट मैं बताती चलूँ और फिर उससे आपको अंदाज़ा होगा. 2018 की इलेक्शन में there were 12.5 मिलियन women जिनके पास CNIC कार्ड नहीं था, 18 से अबव, जो कि एलिजिबल हैं वोटर के तौर पर. अभी हम नौज़ायदा बच्चियों की तो बात ही नहीं कर रहे जो कल परसों पैदा हुई थी. सोचिए कि 2018 की इलेक्शन से लेकर आज 2022 ख़त्म होने को आ रहा है, कितनी बच्चियां पैदा हो गई होंगी, चाहे 48.8% के हिसाब से या कुछ भी हिसाब से, 2.4% पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ रेट के हिसाब से, या कोई भी 1.9 ले लें, आप जो मर्ज़ी प्लग करना चाहती हैं आसमान से वो ले लें. मैं ये कहने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ कि नादरा इज़ नॉट देयर येट. मलिक साहब से मीटिंग हुई थी 2 महीने पहले, उन्होंने बहुत रीअश्योरिंग बात की कि जी मुझे मालूम है कि औरतें और बच्चियां हमारे साथ रह, लेकिन हमने वो जो फैमिली ट्री जिसको फ़ार्म में बे फॉर्म कहते हैं, उसको हमने उसको हम थोड़ा सा अपग्रेड कर रहे हैं, स्ट्रेंथन कर रहे हैं कि तमाम बच्चे और बच्चियां जो पैदा होती हैं वो फैमिली ट्री में आ जाएं, और 18 साल से उम्र की ज़्यादा की लड़कियां और औरतों को CNIC मिले. वी आर नॉट देयर येट, सो आई एम सॉरी, वो नहीं हो सकेगा जी.
ये वाकई बहुत बड़ी टॉपिक है और इस पे गुफ्तगू जारी रहनी चाहिए. तो अनफॉर्चुनेटली अभी हमें इस पैनल को ख़त्म करना पड़ेगा, लेकिन और मैं देख रही हूँ कि हाथ भी ऊपर हैं, बट प्लीज़ आप इस कॉन्वर्जेसन को जारी रखें. और यहाँ पर काफ़ी आई कैन सी दैट देयर आर लॉ एंड पॉलिसी प्रोफेशनल्स हियर ऑल्सो, एंड आई होप दैट दिस इज़ गिवन यू समथिंग टू थिंक अबाउट एंड कंटिन्यू टू वर्क ऑन. सो थैंक यू वेरी मच टू आवर एस्टीम्ड पैनलिस्ट फॉर टेकिंग द टाइम आउट, और आप सबका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. थैंक यू.